So first of all, I must thank the organizers for inviting me here, and I'm going to speak to you about the OCT. So I'll just give you a brief introduction about the OCT before we move on to the clinical scenarios. So it was first invented in 1990 at MIT Boston. It's a cutting edge technology which is capable of optical biopsy, and it is analogous to B-scan. The B-scan uses the sound and this one uses the light. It can achieve 2 or 3 dimensional cross-sectional images of the retina by measuring the back reflected infrared light from the internal structures. So these are the different types of OCT machines. Okay, yeah, I'll just get it closer. The time domain OCT has been now replaced by a spectral domain OCT, which gives us a higher resolution and also is able to give us the 3-dimensional images. So this is how a typical 3-dimensional OCT would look like, which is a spectral domain. We must understand what are the differences between time domain and spectral domain. In time domain, there are mechanical movement of the internal components, which is not there in spectral domain. There is a limited image acquisition speed and lower resolution in time domain compared to the spectral domain. And in time domain, you get radial B-scan lines, whereas in spectral domain, you get raster scans, so it's difficult to miss any data. And dilatation is generally required in time domain, whereas it's not necessary in spectral domain. So this is how a normal OCT would look like, and the 3-dimensional OCT of typical macular hole, epiretinal membranes, and a CSR. And on the bottom right, you can see a N-phase OCT. Now we have moved on to a higher resolution OCT. Earlier, or the spectral domain OCT uses 800 nanometers wavelength, which can resolve all the major intraretinal layers. The only hurdle is that it cannot penetrate beyond the retina due to multiple scattering and absorption by the melanin, which is rich in the retinal pigment epithelium. And therefore there is limited visualization of the choroid. And to see the choroid, we need a longer wavelength, which is 1060 nanometers. So that is called as a swept source OCT, which gives more than 50,000, which is nearly 100,000 scans per second, and it also has a longer wavelength, so it's definitely a better resolution and better penetration. So this is how 3 different OCTs would look like, and you can easily make out that you can see the ultra high resolution OCTs are of more use in seeing the choroids. Also, it is useful in patients who have cataracts because it can penetrate better even in media opacities, and you can see the choroid better. And another advantage of this ultra high resolution OCT is that it is capable of doing OCT angiography without injection of the dye. Earlier we used to use only the ICG to see the choroidal vasculature, but now with the help of this ultra high resolution OCTs, we will be able to see the choroidal vasculature also without injecting the dye. And this is how it would look like. And the N-phase OCT is basically the way you look at the fundus, and the same way the OCT will also show you. So in case of a macular hole, you can see a macular hole in the center and also see a few cystoid spaces in the peripheral areas. Then there is also another variation, which is a handheld OCT, which can be useful in patients who are bedridden, or it can be used intraoperatively and also in the neonates. Also, the intraoperative OCT, which is spectral domain, has been now widely used, and it's basically useful during the macular surgeries like macular hole and epiretinal membranes to identify the planes of cleavage, which can make the surgery safer. There are other varieties also which you should know from your exam point of view, like the Doppler OCT, stereoscopic OCT. Then we have a polarization sensitive OCT. What Doppler OCT does is just like our color Doppler, it has the vascular stiffness, which it can be useful to see the vascular dynamics of the OCT. Also, we can have a spectroscopic OCT, which will basically use the absorption characteristics of the human blood and help us to identify the lesions better. Also, the polarization effect can be used for taking the scans, especially the RPE is having a depolarization characteristic, and this characteristic can be used to identify drusen's. Now we come to some clinical scenarios. First of all, we must understand that the OCT is basically read out with the help of the nature of reflectivity. So you must know that the normal RPE, RNFL is hyperreflective. And the pathological structures like CNVM, scar, the nevi, hard exudates, cotton wool spots, all these are hyperreflective. Whereas hyporeflective structures are the nuclear layer, photoreceptors, and in pathological cases it can be cystoid edema, serous detachment, and the RPE detachment. So this is a normal scan on your left hand side and a cystoid macular edema on the right hand side. These are different stages of macular hole: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. And then this is a lamellar macular hole which doesn't go through right up to the layer of the retinal pigment epithelium. Visualization of vitreous is also very important. Here you can see that there is a complete separation of the vitreous from the retina, and therefore it's a posterior vitreous detachment. Whereas here you can see that there is an attachment of the vitreous to the macular area, and this is vitreomacular traction. There are different types of macular edemas, especially in diabetic patients. A spongy type of macular edema, the one you can see on the top. Then you have a cystoid macular edema. Then we have associated serous retinal detachment, and there can be also vitreomacular traction. Again, another example of cystoid macular edema and a serous detachment. Now, if you look at this angiogram, obviously you will make a diagnosis that this patient has diabetic macular edema. Would you like to go ahead and treat this patient straight away? Anyone in the audience? Would you consider treating this patient with anti-VEGF or laser straight away now? Because you know that this patient is having a macular edema. But that's a common mistake which we should all avoid, because this patient basically has a vitreomacular traction. So no investigation should be used in isolation, but it should be used as an adjunct to each other. So if I had treated this patient with anti-VEGFs or laser, would have been useless, because basically this patient is suffering from vitreomacular traction. Now, going to another example. Now, seeing this patient having a cystoid macular edema on OCT, would you now like to treat him directly with anti-VEGF injections or steroids? So please have a look at the angiogram here. This patient has ischemia, so you would defer treating this patient with such injections. Now this is a patient with cystoid macular edema post-cataract surgery, and you can see huge cystoid spaces and also see a typical picture on the angiogram. And this is the patient having central serous retinopathy. Now here you should differentiate this central serous retinopathy from cystoid macular edema. So identify the cystoid spaces which are located in the inner layers of the retina, whereas in case of central serous retinopathy you have a serous detachment which is obviously located in the outer layer of the retina. Talking about the choroidal neovascular membrane, you have to identify direct evidence as well as the indirect evidence of choroidal neovascular membranes. Here you can see at the bottom a clumping of the hyperreflective area, that is actually the choroidal neovascular membrane, and by the side of it you can see the cystoid spaces, which will tell you that this patient has a choroidal neovascular membrane. Now similarly, this is a patient who has a scar. You don't see any indirect evidence on the OCT, there is no collection of fluid, but you can see definitely a hyperreflective area at the level of the RPE, as well as the choroidal layer is seen missing because of the backscattering effect. Now this is another patient who has a fibrovascular PED. So you can see that there are hyperreflective bands here and associated hyporeflective areas, which are cystoid spaces, which are located in the inner part of the retina. Now this is another example of a large pigment epithelium detachment associated with a serous elevation, and you want to monitor these patients on OCT, and you will always get such images post injection. Now this is another interesting patient who has a large choroidal neovascular membrane and a pigment epithelium detachment, as you can see here, and post injection the patient is not doing so well, and on angiography you can see an RPE rip which can also be picked up on OCT here. Another interesting patient, you can see that there is a collection of the fluid here, and you can see something happening at the margin of the optic disc, and it is obviously an optic disc pit. So what OCT tells us here is that there is a connection of the fluid between the optic nerve and the macula, and the whole debate about where exactly this fluid comes from, whether it comes from the vitreous or whether it comes from the CSF, but definitely there is a connection of the fluid in the macular area and to the optic disc pit. Now this is a patient who complains of decreased vision, and this is his angiography, which apparently looks perfectly alright, whereas these are the things that you see on the color picture, and this is where OCT will come in handy, and you can see that stalactite like lesions, and this is a patient of retinoschisis. Now coming to another patient who was 65-year-old diabetic, post cataract surgery, reduced vision, and he was given injection triamcinolone with the hope that he'll improve his eyesight, but he did not respond, and then was referred to us for an OCT. But on the OCT you can see that there is nothing here. So this is where exactly you will see a dramatic picture on the angiography, but you will really not see any elevation in the macular area. You can only see cystoid spaces, and this is characteristic of the idiopathic juxtafoveal telangiectasia. So just to revisit, there are 2-3 things. One is nothing is seen on the angiography, but you see this kind of an appearance, it's retinoschisis, whereas you see a dramatic picture on the angiogram and you don't see much on the OCT, that is IJT. And you want to see again the cystoid macular edema. I'll show you how it looks like. On angiography also you see a dramatic picture, and on OCT also you will see a dramatic picture. So both places you will see a dramatic picture, elevation and flower petal appearance. So this is cystoid macular edema. Nothing seen on the angiography, but you can see stalactite appearance, that is retinoschisis, and you can see a dramatic picture on the angiography but not much on the OCT, that is idiopathic juxtafoveal telangiectasia. This is another picture of a patient of Best disease. You can see a lipofuscin like pigment accumulated here, and that's why you don't see anything at the level of the retinal pigment epithelium, and you also see that the photoreceptor layer is absent, and you can see a big scar has already developed, and that's why you don't see anything here. That's the backscattering effect of a scar. This is another interesting patient who has developed an optic disc pit. Although the inner part of the retina is intact, there's defect in the outer retinal layer. So you can also detect the outer retinal layer holes with the help of OCT, and generally a surgical management in such a patient would do good to the patient. I don't think I should be going into the disc scans because Dr. Sood has already covered it in detail. But very interesting features that you see on anterior segment OCT. This is a LASIK flap that you can see, and this is another interesting patient who was treated for cataracts. He underwent phacoemulsification and was not doing well, and was developing cystoid macular edema which was not responding to the treatment, and you can see a small thin layer here which is definitely a Descemet's detachment, and which was repositioned with the help of injection of gas, and the patient's macular edema resolved. Here you can see a bandage contact lens over it. This is another patient who had developed this kind of picture after phacoemulsification, which was uneventful, but unfortunately during the injection of the lens, probably the injector penetrated deep inside the stroma, and therefore this patient was having corneal edema which was not subsiding, but with steroids and with time eventually it subsided, and here you can see actually the level of the incision. So with this I thank you all for your patient hearing, and I again thank the organizers and the chairman for inviting me here to speak in front of you. Thank you.